What I'm going to do is cover, sort of give an overview of the skiing areas in northern Norway, and hopefully there'll be something for the people who have skied there before. There might be some new places I can inspire you to visit, as well as inspire those who haven't been, inspire you to go, because it is absolutely one of the skiing destinations in Europe, if not the world, that you should visit, I think, once in a lifetime. So first of all, just to put it on the map, I'm going to be focusing on the ski areas north of the Arctic Circle. That covers a mountain range of about 550, 600 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. Norway itself, of course, is very long, about 1,750 kilometers. And if you want, you can ski the whole length of it. It's mountainous practically the whole length. There is a recognized ski route, the length of it, done usually over one season. Ben Bardsley, UK skier, did it last winter. It's about 2,300 kilometers and a major achievement. And there's a couple of books out about doing that traverse by British skiers, quite interesting books. But as I said, I'm going to focus on the skiing areas north of the Arctic Circle. What I'm going to do first is just show a few pictures, which maybe just to give a bit of a flavour of skiing in northern Norway. And I think what makes it special in particular is the fact that you are skiing almost always very close to the sea, above the sea, starting at sea level, often right on the seashore. And so you have this amazing feeling of skiing above the water, close proximity to the water. And I think that makes it quite unique. There's nowhere really else in the world that has that. Possibly some parts of Alaska, perhaps some parts of Greenland, but nowhere else that's so easily accessible, relatively short flight from Central Europe or the UK. And the fact that it is still, in some respects, an Arctic wilderness. It does feel very much on the edge of Europe. There are still relatively few tourist facilities, practically no ski resorts. There's one in Narvik, and another one in northern Sweden in Riksgränsen, but basically nothing like you find in the Alps. There's great wildlife, whales and dolphins in the fjords, eagles in the skies. So really quite fantastic. And yet it is still a very original landscape. The locals, it's a still farm and fish there. So you have this feeling of being in a remote area with a degree of originality, which maybe has been lost a bit in the Alps. Okay, so yeah, few pictures here just to give you a flavour. And of course, if you go there at the right time, in the early part of the winter, you have a very good chance of seeing spectacular northern lights. Most of the skiing is far enough north that you can see those relatively frequently. So start looking at some of the areas that I'm going to cover. Let's just see if I can get this pointer working carefully now. Yeah, so I'm going to start in the south, in around Bodø, and work our way during the course of the talk up to the far north. First of all, I should say that I haven't skied in all of these areas, in fact, relatively far from it. There's a vast amount of skiing here. These circles just highlight the main areas where there's guidebooks and information, but basically over the whole area, there is as you can see, there are lots of mountains. And if you wanted to just do a road trip and stop and ski, you would find lots to ski and nobody else skiing with you. Bodø, first of all, I haven't skied there. There was an Eagle Ski Club trip planned to go there this winter with Alan Sloan. Obviously, that's not going to happen. There is a recently issued Norwegian or guidebook in Norwegian for those who want to go. but I'm going to leave it to Alan to report on it when he eventually gets there. Moving further north, Lofoten. Probably this is one of the most famous destinations, partly as a tourist destination, as a climbing destination, and somewhat as a skiing destination. I haven't really skied there, maybe only once, just on the periphery of it. It can have, my understanding is it can have absolutely great skiing. It is very much weather dependent, and for every person you meet who says that the skiing is great, you meet somebody who says it's not so great because it rains too much or the weather's bad or whatever. What is true is that the weather is worse than it is further north. There's a lot more precipitation. It's pretty exposed to the weather systems coming in from the Atlantic, and snow at low levels can get stripped fairly rapidly. So I think it's one of those destinations, maybe it's a little bit difficult to plan ahead. You should, if it's a good season, plan to go there and make the best of it while the snow is there. Moving inland from Lofoten, the next major area is Narvik, around Narvik. And this is a really quite large area, quite diverse. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. I skied there, spent a week there led a club tour there 2 years ago, 2019. There's a new guidebook that came out in 2019 in English. There's also one in Norwegian. And it covers quite diverse terrain from some of the Western Islands out here towards Lofoten, around Fjord. This is a large fjord that leads into Narvik, the city or town of Narvik. Some of the inland mountains up towards the Swedish border, and then some quite large mountains south of Narvik and inland up to about 1900 meters, which are quite heavily glaciated. It's worth saying that in this area, most of the skiing I'll describe is done as day tours. However, particularly in this Narvik area, there is the opportunity to do some hut-to-hut touring. There are some huts, and some 2 or 3 day routes are described in the guidebook. The terrain varies from relatively mellow to really incredibly impressive in some of the granite mountains down at the south end of this area, which I will describe. First of all, Narvik itself, it's not a particularly attractive town. It's more on the functional side, and that's because it's Europe's largest iron ore exporting port. So the railway comes in from Sweden, bringing down iron ore. You can, if you don't want to fly there, you can get there by train. And one intrepid eagle on the tour that I led there came from the UK by train to Narvik, which I think took about 3 days via Stockholm. But otherwise, there are flights to the nearby airport of Evenes. Moving on, once you move outside the town, the scenery is fantastic, as it is in everywhere in this part of Norway. This is a peak called Strandtind. I'm just going to see if I can get rid of this control panel because it's annoying me there. Let's hide video panel. Does that work? No. Hide. Yes. Okay, that's better. Yeah. So this is a mountain called Strandtind, just on the north side of Fjorden, that we skied up. It's not actually in the guidebook. We can find some information on the internet, and this would be a typical Norwegian ski day, starting from the sea, skinning up. This is another peak called Jlehkkevárri, also on the north side of Fjorden. Relatively mellow terrain. We had a little bit of wind and cloud on this day. I think this was our first peak of the trip, but very nice skiing, good snow, and quite safe terrain on this particular peak. This is a bit later in our week in Narvik. As I said, we had fairly unsettled weather, and this is just to show what in a way, typical Norwegian ski day would start with. You spend the first hour or so usually skinning up through birch trees, through birch forest, which can be quite spread out like this. It can be much tighter, in which case it's worth choosing a good line and trying to follow it on the way down. Otherwise, you can and in some areas you can end up doing a little bit of bushwhacking in the lower regions, but usually it's not too bad. We also went further south on this trip into an area called Skjomen fjord. This is a very spectacular area from south of Narvik, going down towards Tusfjord, which has a lot of sheer granite walls, very spectacular peaks. There's some amazing looking couloirs that you can ski here, but often there are quite accessible ascent routes round the back of some of these peaks. We had a day skiing in the trees here because, as you can see, the weather wasn't really fit for going on to the higher tops. And then further south in the Narvik area, you have an amazing mountain called Stetinden. This is Norway's national mountain. It has amazing rock climbing in summer, and also, somewhat unbelievably, you can ski relatively close to the top of it. You can ski up to the foresummit. And there is some incredible looking skiing in this granite mountain area, which we unfortunately didn't get a chance to visit. But I would highly recommend not visiting Narvik, skiing in Narvik. If, for example, you've skied in Lyngen already and liked it, Narvik would be a great option. There's a huge amount of varied terrain. There's less people than in Lyngen. I don't think we really saw anybody else the entire week we were skiing there. There is a backup ski resort in Narvik where you can do some lift assisted off-piste or even start some tours from the top of the lift system. So it is pretty adaptable for different weather, and a huge range of mountains, some quite serious, some quite high, some smaller, and some mellow terrain. So I would say it's a great destination to go for. Okay, then moving, I seem to have stuck. Why doesn't my, okay. Yes, moving onwards. So leaving Narvik, moving up north and out to the islands again now. I'll cover a little bit about Senja. I've skied there once, very spectacular island. They describe it as Norway in miniature, and in particular in the northwest corner here, some very spectacular fjords, not particularly big mountains. They're around, I think, up to about 800 to 900 meters mostly. So some of them you can do perhaps 2 outings in a day. Snow conditions can be very good. Again, being exposed to the west and the Atlantic, it can catch some of the worst of the Atlantic weather compared to some of the regions further inland, but very spectacular and certainly worth a visit. And I'll show a couple of pictures. The same would apply to the island further up, Jlehkkevárri. This is the island located outside Tromsø, which is here. So it's very frequently visited by the Tromsø skiing locals. Mountains up to around the 900 meter level again, quite diverse terrain. I haven't done a lot of skiing here, but it's all described in this Ski Touring in Troms guidebook. I should say the county of Troms covers most of the area north of Narvik, up to around pretty much all the areas that I'm going to describe. There are islands further north. Jagervasstind is this place here. I haven't marked it, but there's a few summits described in the guidebook here. And beyond that, there are still more islands with more mountains and probably more skiing. It's just that there's no information about them. But if you want to go out and visit and explore, I'm sure you'll find something good to ski. But going back to Senja, just show a couple of pictures from a mountain that we skied down in the southwest corner of Senja. This is called Kvænan. And I just want to hide the meeting controls again. Yeah, a mountain called Kvænan, quite amazing ski up under the summit ridge here, which has these incredible rock pinnacles. We had a great ski down on good snow on this occasion, and the view from the top is spectacular. You're looking out south and west over the back of the Lofoten Island chain, basically. And looking at all these mountains here, none are in the guidebook. Some are quite difficult to reach, but it just gives you a sense of some of the terrain in Norway that is around to explore if you want to do that. Again, I'm having difficulty moving the slide forward. Okay, so picture from Kvælan. This is the island north of Senja, outside Tromsø, that I described. Very popular peak called Burren, quite spectacular summit which you can ski right onto the top of, and nice ski down. And this is something that the Tromsø locals can just come out and do in a morning. But there's plenty of other peaks there, and you could quite easily base yourself in Tromsø and ski on some of the western islands like Kvælan, Ringvassøya, some of the mountains around Tromsø. Again, this would be a good option if you've been in Lyngen and liked the area and wanted to do something a little bit different, perhaps a little bit more off the beaten track. Okay, then moving on to Lyngen. This is, of course, the most probably the most famous skiing place in Norway, perhaps. It hasn't always been like that, of course. It's only really in the last perhaps 15 years that it has become very well known worldwide, and it is now, I think, recognized as a world-class ski destination, and that is reflected in the fact, or reflected that it is relatively, or can be relatively busy now in peak season, which tends to be in mid-March through to around mid-April. Having said that, there's plenty of places to go in Lyngen where not many other skiers go. So if you're prepared to ski in a little bit longer along some of the valleys, and perhaps do a bit of research and look at the map a little bit more and some of the other guidebooks, you can certainly find some quite wild skiing still. So I first visited Lyngen in around 1998, 99, something like that. It was before I'd heard about it from some Finnish skiing friends who were visiting there, some of the pioneers of steep skiing in Lyngen, actually. At that time, there was no guidebook. There was practically no information available on the internet. There was few facilities. We stayed in a local farmer's sort of spare house, looked at the map, and tried to figure out where we could go skiing. And of course, those first couple of trips perhaps didn't achieve so much, but I learned to love the place. I think it's one of the most fantastic alpine ranges in Europe, and it should be on, if you haven't been, it should be on everybody's skiing destination. So Lyngen, I'll say first of all that the city of Tromsø is located off to the west here. So Lyngen is about 1.5 hours drive from Tromsø airport, so it's pretty accessible. The peninsula is divided into 2 parts. It's about 130 kilometers long. The village of Lyngsedet is quite handily located centrally, and makes probably in the best place to stay, or in the vicinity. There's accommodation more or less up around the ferry terminals here along this road, and a little bit down here. But this means if you're staying here, you're located fairly centrally. You can also hop on the ferries, which are free for foot passengers, and go and ski on the other side in Fjord here, which is a good option. I'll talk about that later. Many people ski. Most of the visitors, many visitors will be guided. Many will be skiing up the western side here, round Lyngsedet, up on this eastern side a little bit, and perhaps a little bit some places down on the east side of Lyngen here. It's worth saying that the climate is slightly different on different sides of Lyngen. So if it's bad weather, you're better being on the eastern side, because the western side is usually catching the worst of the weather. And certainly the precipitation is less on this eastern side. And in fact, Skjomen here on the mainland is one of the driest places in Norway. So I won't describe too much about the main areas of Lyngen. I'll come to that in a minute, but I'll just to say that if you do go there on a popular peak at Easter, like this is the classic peak of Storgalten, you will find that there are plenty of people on the summit with you. But there's plenty of other places to go as well, and maybe trying to highlight 1 or 2 of the areas where there may be less people. First of all, just a little bit of history. Lyngen wasn't always busy. It was 100 years ago. It was a very, very remote area, not connected to the rest of Norway except by sea, effectively. So this is Lyngsedet village in 1892. It's also a culturally interesting area because it's where where different cultures, Norwegian speakers from the south, Sami people, these are the Lapps from the east, and the Kvænan, which are a Finnish-speaking people who migrated from northern Finland, all met up and settled. So you will see that many of the now the signposts in Lyngen, for example, are in Norwegian, Sami language, and Finnish. That wasn't always the case because the Norwegians tried at one stage to suppress the Sami and Finnish-speaking people in languages in this area. The area was, as I said, visited by Sami, so probably right up until the Second World War, and shortly afterwards, Sami Lapp people came down in the summer and camped in Lyngsedet. This is Sami people in Lyngsedet in the 1890s, early 1900s, but it won't have looked a lot different through most of the early part of the last century. Let me get rid of this again. It was shortly after this period, in the early 19th century, that the first British mountaineers started to come to Lyngen. So Cecil Slingsby, in particular, was he's called the father of Norwegian mountaineering. Pioneered many climbs, no, not skiing, but climbing all over the country, and also visited Lyngen. Hastings Haskett Smith, who climbed the famous Nape's Needle in the UK, Lake District, visited. But probably the most well-known, or who contributed the most, was this lady, Mrs. Aubrey LeBlond, otherwise known as Elizabeth Mayne, quite remarkable lady. she set up and became first president of the Ladies Alpine Club, because ladies weren't allowed to join the Men's Alpine Club at that stage. And she spent 2 or 3 seasons in Lyngen. It was a very long expedition to get there from the UK then. It took around 10 days to 2 weeks. And she would set up camp for the summer. This was the inside of her tent in Lyngen at the time. So she had all the luxuries with her by the look of it. And she brought with her 2 guides from Zermatt, the Imbodens, father and son. And she made a number of first ascents, around 20 or so, and has written about it in a book called Mountaineering in the Land of the Midnight Sun. And yes, very interesting lady. But let's move on to the skiing again. If I can do that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about an area in southern Lyngen, which maybe is a little bit less well known than, at least to foreign visitors, than some of the other areas. This is the Laxelvdalen Valley, down on the southeast side. It is very well known, I would say, amongst Finnish people, Finns. So if there's Finns listening up, I'm sure many of you will know it. There's some great, a beautiful mountain there called Laxelvtind, the Laxelvtind range here. And you can, it doesn't look like particularly good ski touring terrain, looking at it face on like this, but it is possible to ascend up here, skin up here, and then either skin or boot pack up this couloir. It's not as steep as it looks. This is about 1,400 meters vertical of ascent here from the valley bottom up to this pass here. So we're looking at this area here. And it's, once you get up there, this is skinning up on an absolutely beautiful day. I think in 2014 with an Eagle Ski Club members tour, really. Looking up the couloir, the Thomas couloir, I think it's about 600 meters. In good snow like this, you can skin pretty much all the way up it. And come on, slides. Okay, yeah. This is exiting the top through a notch or col called the Gate of Heavenly Peace. And then you come out onto this amazing glacier plateau or shelf, where you have a number of summits that are quite easily accessible. Imbodentind is this one over in the corner here. There's a couple behind me, Thomas Tind and others, and then the highest peak, which is called Laxelvtind. You can also get at from here. There's great views over to the south, I guess, to a mountain here called Ellendaltind. This is about 1,300 meters. Very nice ski around the back of it, or you can, there's a great couloir here at about 35 to 40 degrees that you can ski down. Longdalstind, another great ski, quite a big mountain, fairly big day. It's about over 1,500 meters and needs good snow conditions. This is Stor Laxelvtind. This is the glacier plateau I talked about. The route up Laxelvtind goes up this gully couloir here. You probably would want to take a rope near the top. It's quite steep and can be some exposed rock. It's not difficult, but might need a rope and some protection. And sometimes there's a chock stone which you need to rappel over on the way back down or climb over on the way back up. But it's a great area, great views of the surrounding mountains and sea, and a big day out from sea level. This is skiing back down. This is the summit of Stor Laxelvtind and some of the other summits you can get at from this area. And then you have a long ski back down the approach couloir. which often has very good snow, or at least the occasions I've skied it. This is a local guy on telemark skis showing us how it's done. Okay, moving on then to the highest summit of Lyngen, which is accessible. It's usually climbed from this southwestern side of Lyngen, and this is Jlehkkevárri. It's a great big lump of a mountain, heavily glaciated, numerous sub-summits, and they call it the Mont Blanc of the north, and there is maybe some resemblance. There is one of Norway's finest ski tours is considered the complete traverse of Jlehkkevárri, starting from the west side here, up over, and then exiting over a number of other summits to the north and skiing down to the fjord. I haven't done that. I have been up the normal way a few years ago. It's quite a big day out. You have to go over a subsidiary summit, and then which is this one, and then down and drop down again, and then head up to the main summit of Jlehkkevárri. Very flat, so you need to walk around to find where the actual summit is. But it's a good hill to have been up, and you have a very long descent, obviously, and some of it quite steep. This is skiing back down from the subsidiary summit, back down to the fjord. After you've done all that, it's probably been a long day, something like 2,200, 300 meters of vertical, doing it via this approach. Yeah, so quite a big day out. The skiing in this area in Laxelvdalen and Balsfjord is not all so big or steep. There's a number of more mellow mountains. Middagstind is one of the classics in the area. Blåtinden is another great peak. This is Roger Upton in the Kvænan, the amazing Kvænan, which is found at the top of Blåtind. And again, great skiing above the fjord, descending from Blåtind and back down to the beach. Okay, so I guess the message with Lyngen is if you move away from Lyngsedet, you will find areas which are probably not so popular. Certainly look at the map, get some of the other guidebooks, which I'll come to later, and you can find areas off the beaten track. Most of the groups, most of the people are probably on about 20 or so of the most popular summits in Lyngen. There's plenty more. I am going to describe one of the popular summits, or let's say one of the most famous summits in the northern half, and this is Jagervasstind. And that's because I think it's one of the, probably the finest ski mountaineering peaks anywhere in the world, taking it overall, the overall package. It's a beautiful looking mountain. You start it right from sea level here, usually approach from the west by skiing across this lake, frozen lake. If it's not frozen, you can go around to the north, up into this coombe here, this glaciated coombe, little valley, and then up a couloir where you pop out onto a steep ridge, and then up to the skiers' summit. So this is approaching the upper bowl, which does have a small glacier. I think it's not necessary to use a rope and glacier gear on it. It's so well filled. And the route goes into up this couloir here and up onto the ridge, shown in a little bit more detail here. You can possibly see some ski tracks come out onto this ridge. This part you have to boot up. This shoulder here, which is relatively narrow, probably around 10 to 20 meters wide, you can actually skin up, and you pop out onto the skiers' summit here. And in reverse, there's doesn't look too feasible, but you can start skiing from the very top here all the way down down to the lakeshore. It's a remarkable ski, but it is also a great ski mountaineering summit. Let me just get rid of that again. Move on. Yeah, so this is booting up the final approach couloir up to the ridge on Jagervasstind. It's not too steep, it's around 35, possibly 40. And then you pop out onto this ridge. Have to be careful because there's some big cornices, there's wild exposure on either side, and you come up then onto the skiers summit, where you're faced with this, and this is the ridge leading over to the true summit here in the distance. There's quite a steep drop which you can't see in this photograph, which you either have to rappel or down climb. So you have to be sure that you can, if you're going to do that, that you can actually climb back up it. Some people leave a rope there to make sure. I've been fortunate enough, as you can see, to be there in good weather, good conditions, and the right team to be able to go over to the main summit. This is looking back. This is the skiers summit from the main summit. You can see how exposed it is. Yeah, a great outing. Surely one of the finest ski mountaineering trips in Europe, if not anywhere, I would say. The views are also spectacular in all directions, and the ski down is also great. After you've done that, you almost certainly will want to go back and have a sauna. It's very likely your accommodation will have a sauna, and once you've had a sauna with a great view, you'll probably want to go and have a dip in the sea to cool off. That's also, of course, a great tradition in Norway, perhaps particularly in this part of northern Norway with some Finnish influence. The skiing in Norway, in Lyngen, isn't all, let's say, so steep. There's plenty of more mellow skiing. This is my daughter Sarah with a friend on Fjord, looking over Lyngen fjord to the east, and a range called the Olderdalen or Kvænan Alps, which has great skiing. It tends to get tends to get quite a lot of snow. Can have better weather if Lyngen is socked in bad weather, and you can get there easily on the ferry from Lyngen. So it's a very good option. Very nice skiing, which I'll show in some of the pictures here. Partly because you're looking over at some of the main peaks of the Lyngen east wall, which is very spectacular. And I said, plenty of nice mellow skiing terrain. I think this is on a mountain called no, I'm not going to say what it is. I've forgotten what it is. Might be Sorpnageyser. Okay, then moving away from the immediate Lyngen vicinity, going a little bit further north now into what I'm calling the Northern Islands. This is Arnøya, Kogan, and Ulløya. Ulløya is quite well known. You can reach it quite easily in the day from Lyngen. There's a very safe peak at the southern end of the island. You can get to, which has very good skiing on broad slopes, and there's an interesting historical trading station and fishing station at the bottom. So it's a great, makes a great day's outing. While I'm looking at this map, I should say that there's a recent pamphlet and guide, which I'll show later, which has come out in the last year, I think, which describes some skiing in this area to the north and east of Lyngen on the mainland. It looks pretty interesting. I was there last summer actually, last June, and we did something there, and there's some I think some great looking options and plenty more to explore other than what is described in this pamphlet. So this area around Nordrace, Storslet, further east and north up towards the Alta, is a great area if you want to go off the beaten track. But Arnøya and Kvænan here, these islands, get the slides to move. Yeah, these islands becoming more well known, more visited, but not, I think, anywhere near as popular as Lyngen and the Kvæfjord area further south. This is taken from Arnøya, looking from the highest peak there, looking south to Kvænan, mountains up to about over 1,200 meters and around 1,100 meters on Arnøya. Plenty to explore still. There's a little bit of information in a guidebook, a little bit of information on the internet, but plenty of mountains where there's no information. So I think if you go there and take your explorer mindset, you can find plenty of interesting things to ski. So I was lucky enough to be in Northern Norway last June when it opened after the COVID restrictions were lifted for a while. My friend Åke and I drove up from southern Finland just after midsummer and had a great week there in great weather. It had also been a fantastic snow season last winter in Northern Norway. So even though it was late June, we could practically ski down still to sea level in some places, and had relatively little walking to do to get up to the snow line. This is on the island of Kvænan, the highest peak called Skjomen. So relatively, I think in full winter conditions, it would be a relatively serious peak to get onto. It's quite steep and exposed, quite high consequence avalanche terrain. So I think it's one that needs you need to be sure about the conditions. But in the spring, when we went up, it was great. There's good views over to the town of Jlehkkevárri and the area in Finnmark, Loppa, further north, which I'll talk about soon. Beautiful views. Looking north from here, there's really nothing in between you and the North Pole apart from Spitsbergen. So it's, yeah, great views. And a very good ski down. We were often going up fairly late in the evenings when the sun was a bit lower, and the slopes we wanted were in the shade. We were camping on this trip. I'm going to talk next in the next slides about this Arnøya. This is the highest peak on Arnøya. It's a great ski up from this southwest side. We descended down the other side, which I'll show. I'm going to say a couple of words about fishing there, because if you like fishing, it's in Northern Norway, it's so easy. This is after our skiing, this is Åke frying up some fish that we just caught in the fjord. Usually only takes a few minutes if you're lucky. You can catch some great fish. This is Marcus Sen, the club's auditor, with a large cod that he caught after a day's skiing. Okay, back to the skiing. So this is ascending Arnøya on Arnøya. Relatively straightforward approach. It's a little bit steep in some parts in the last part, and then we come up onto the summit ridge. You have to usually dump the skis and walk the last part. There's some steps to climb over. You could take the skis with you and ski down some of it. Great views from the summit, and on this occasion we skied down a different route than the way we'd come up. We skied down to the east down a valley which I'm sure would have earlier in the winter, or let's say earlier in the spring, probably right through to May. It probably has a good chance of having great snow. But a very nice ski nonetheless, down on spring snow, back down to the roadside, and then we had a bit of a hike to the car. But there's plenty of other skiing on Arnøya. There is a not exactly a lodge, but there's some good accommodation options there. A place called Lauksletta Overnatting has some apartments to let. They do food and have a sauna, and nice friendly family that are running it. So good option to stay. When we were there in late June, the reindeer had been moved down from the high sort of plateaus in the east down. They come down to the sea for the summer. So as you can see, this cabin here had reindeer grazing in the garden. Moving further north again, I'd just been talking about Arnøya and Kogen here. This is the mainland town of Alta, which you can also fly to, is here. And there is skiing in this Fjord, or this Lopp Peninsula, called the Loppa Peninsula. There's nothing really in any guidebooks that I'm aware of at the moment. It's mainly visited by people doing ski and sail trips or boat-based trips, and it is more well suited to that than perhaps Lyngen is, because as you can see, the roads don't really join up, so you have to make use of ferries. And I think it's an area where if you're based in a boat, you can really make, especially if you've got a skipper who's willing to stay with the boat, you can really make the most of it. So I haven't been there. I was supposed to go last year, but obviously with Andy, a club member and friend, Andy Collins, on his boat, but didn't make it. Supposed to be going with Andy again this year. I have to say, I think it's unlikely we'll be able to make it, but not giving up hope yet. There are a couple of lodges now that have, well, lodges or places to stay that have opened. There's one in Bergsfjord here, which looks quite interesting. There's places to stay in Nuvsvåg, where you can also stay, and it is possible, I guess, to base yourself in some of the other places, and ski what you can get at from the roadside if you're not there by boat. There is quite a large ice cap, the Uxfjord Jokelen ice cap, and plenty of steep mountains, some of which are quite inaccessible. And it's rumoured that there's still some unclimbed summits there, some minor summits. I don't know if that's true, but it's certainly not particularly well explored from a skiing perspective. Further north again, I'll start with Seeland, which is an island just south of Hammerfest, which is just off the map here. Seeland has skiing. There's some accommodation options. You can get at it from Hammerfest. Again, there's a small ice cap, peaks up to around 1,000 meters or just over. A boat would also be a good option here, but I think it seems like there are some options if you're land-based and want to go and explore, do some traverses, multi-day traverses. I would imagine there's quite a lot of potential to get have an exciting trip there. Skjomen, I know even less about. I do know that some of the ski sail trips visit there. A Finnish guy, I think Juha who spent a couple of winters up in northern Norway on a boat. That's right through the winter, including the polar night, the dark time, has been skiing here, I think. But I don't know how you even get there in winter if it's possible. It might just be that it's inhabited in summer, but certainly there's mountains there to explore, and certainly good skiing. And this area does tend to get a lot of snow, and the season can be very long. So often you can ski well into June in a normal season. Certainly May, you'd have absolutely no problem. Further north than this, you start to run out of mountains, basically, North Cape, and that area is relatively flat terrain. So that's, I think, covered what I know about the main areas in northern Norway. If I can get to the next slide. Yes, I was saying a little bit about skiing by boat in this northern region. It is a good option. I have done it. I wouldn't recommend it if you're going to go to Lyngen. People do offer ski sail trips there. It was very popular, but I reckon it's better to be land-based, preferably with a car. You're more, you can make the most of the different weather. Go over to the mainland if the weather's bad on Lyngen. Go over to the east side if the weather's poor, or the west side if the weather's good. So if you're in a boat, you tend to be a bit more stuck as to which side of Lyngen or the island you're on. But sailing and skiing there is, if you've got lots of time, is a nice option. So I'll come to some of the more sort of information related aspects. This slide shows what I know about the English language guidebooks that are available for skiing in northern Norway. The most popular one, and the one you should have for most regions in Troms, which covers a lot of the areas I've talked about. This is Ski Touring in Troms by Espen Nordahl, who was a member of the Eagle Ski Club. I believe he's not at the moment. He's a mountain guide who used to live in Tromsø. I think he lives in Svolvær in Lofoten now. This guide is in its second edition, and it's a sort of selective guide, you could say, but covers a lot of, more than, you know, plenty for several visits, and it's now it's a well laid out guidebook. If you're going to Lyngen and maybe you've been there before, I want to look for other ideas, getting hold of this book, the Lyngen Alps, is great. It also covers climbing, but there's a lot of skiing, mostly skiing in it. It gives a lot of ideas for more obscure options, obscure mountains, which are not in this guidebook, in the Troms guidebook. It is certainly a good option to have. Ski touring around Narvik, the guidebook I've mentioned. There's one to the Lofoten Islands. Then this one is a free pamphlet. You can either order it from the Visit Lyngen Fjord website, or you can download it as a PDF and print it out yourself. It covers, I think, around 25 peaks in the islands and parts of the mainland north of Lyngen, and based in the similar format to the Ski Touring in Troms guidebook. And it's, I think, it's a guidebook. I think the intention is to try and take off some of the pressure, as it were, off Lyngen and get some more visitors to go further north. And certainly there is great skiing there, so I would recommend, if you're visiting the areas further north, then to get hold of this. There are a couple of other guidebooks in Norwegian to the area around Bodø, you know, with Google Translate on your phone, and it's got maps. You can generally make quite good sense of these. And then there's, I think, a fairly new guidebook to touring around Harstad, which is an area close to Narvik, which I don't know much about. I'm sure, again, it has fantastic skiing. If I can move the slides. Yes. So this slide is to remind me to talk about the weather and when to go. You'll have probably noticed that a lot of the pictures I took were in nice sunny weather. And of course, it's not always like that. Northern Norway is exposed to the Atlantic. However, it is much better than further south and southwest Norway. It tends to be a little bit north of the main low pressure systems. And particularly once you get sort of in from Tromsø and the mainland, there isn't, you tend to get a bit more sort of grey, clag, low cloud, rather than really active bad weather systems. And the spring is actually one of the driest periods. of the season. That said, it can be bad weather, and then there are tree skiing options you can find relatively easily, sort of low down, so that you can find some bad weather options. This is a typical house, by the way, that we, at least of the sort that I often rent when I'm up there. There's some more fancy options now, but you quite often get a quite basic self-catering house like this, which isn't too expensive. In terms of when to go, well, the ski season, certainly in Lyngen, for example, starts often in October, and people ski right through to June. Some of that's during the polar night, so you need a good head torch, but probably the main season is really through from perhaps early March through to mid-April, late April, something like that. I think if you come in early March, it's early to mid-March, it's the transition between winter and spring. So the snowpack is changing more from a sort of winter snowpack potentially to a spring snowpack. It's warming up a bit. You've got plenty of daylight, which is good. So it means you can go out in the afternoon. It's obviously a maritime snowpack, and there isn't so much temperature variation during day and night often. So there's not quite the need for early starts like there is in the Alps. That doesn't apply everywhere, obviously, but there's plenty of mountains you can go out and ski in the afternoon or evening if the weather clears, if it's been bad weather and it suddenly clears up. So probably early March through to mid-April is a good time to go, but you can go much later, especially in a good snow year, through to mid-May probably. Starting to run out of time, but we're nearly there. Next slide. Just for those who don't know, weather information, yr.no, on the website of the phone app available. That's where you get all, it's a very good weather app. You can follow both YR and a Norwegian weather page called Storm Geo Weather on Facebook, when they often give some useful extra information about particularly bad weather or possibly good weather that's coming in the future. So that's quite handy. Talked a little bit about the precipitation, that it's basically drier on the east side of Lyngen, and that applies basically in the whole area. That more inland you go, it does tend to, and away from the islands, it does tend to get a bit drier. In terms of the all-important snow forecast, avalanche forecasting website is varsom.no. There's an app as well, which is Varsom Reg Obs. This is a relatively recent development in Norway. I don't know quite when it started, probably around, at least in northern Norway, maybe around 6 or 7 years ago, might have been a bit longer. And it has been developing. I would say it's not quite as sophisticated as the avalanche forecasts are not as sophisticated as they are in the Alps. It covers a very large area. So you have to, still have your avalanche head, very much snow stability head screwed on when you're skiing there. And this, the app is, I should also mention it has slope gradient shading, which is very handy for planning as well. And you can download free map tiles, which is also good. There's an interesting website called cnorge.no, which is basically hydrology. So you can look at skiing conditions and snowfall coverage, and I'll show that here. So it's basically daily updated maps of snowfall and snow coverage, skiing conditions, historical snowfall record. And this is comparing 11th of January 2020 with 11th of January this year. Blue is basically more snow. So you can see that last year there was a lot of snow in the area. Green is bare ground. So you can see often these outer islands tend not to have too much snow early in the season at least. And you can also see that this year, at least in January, it was a relatively poor snow year. Brown is meaning that there's less snow than average. and green bare ground. So it's quite a useful planning tool, at least get an idea what's been going on with the snow, maybe in the weeks leading up to your trip. Maps, there's one in 50,000 maps available. Some special sheets cover Lyngen and other areas. GPS, those maps, you can get pretty good free Garmin GPS maps from these sources. A reminder to adjust your compass, because so far north, Lyngen is around 70 degrees, 69, 70, that variation is around 10 degrees east. So if you're using your compass and you haven't corrected for that, you'll be way off. A couple of other information sources. There's a great website called Tjugo.no. It's a local Tromsø skier and climber who climbed all 666 mountains in over 1,000 meter in Troms, many in winter, after massive effort. And he has route details, pictures, maps. So it's really good for planning, especially if you're going off the beaten track. And it is a lot of it, most of it's in Norwegian, I think, but again, with Google Translate, it works pretty well. Another good website is the Northern Playground, lyngen.name, run by I think a pioneer of mountaineering in Lyngen, maybe in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Again, there's lots of indexed mountain routes and pictures, and again, good for planning off the beaten track. Okay, I think I have run out of slides and certainly out of time. I hope I've inspired you to go there if you haven't been, and encouraged you to go and explore some other areas if you have been, for example, to Lyngen or some of the other more popular areas. And I'm happy to stop here and hand over to Kathy.
That's great, Dave. Thank you so much. I think we've all really enjoyed that, and we've had a really good audience, which so thank you for having done this again.
You're welcome. Good.
Before we pick up on some questions, I'm going to answer one question and frankly do a straight plug for the club. So there was a question about, yes, but where do I go? What guide do I hire? What company do I go with? Have a look, because a lot of you are not club members. Have a look at the Eagle Ski Club. We're the Britain's biggest ski touring club, 1,300 members. Our most expensive membership level is £35. You can afford it. And we've got money available to help people in various categories. People who are starting out, people who are younger, people who are leading tours. You can get your money back. And this winter, before COVID destroyed our touring schedule, we had 4 trips going out to Norway. Some are led by guides, some are led by other members. Either way, it's really good value. And it'll get you variety. So, before you go rushing out to look at the commercial guiding offers for Norway, come and have a look at what's being offered through the Eagle Ski Club. You don't have to join the organized trips. You can also make use of our various means of connecting members to just reach out to other members and say, who wants to join me on my wild Norwegian ski road trip idea? I mean, I'll come. So, have a look at the resources of the club if you're interested in Norway. Question from Bill about the Hurtigruten, which I think was the postal boat that sails up and down the coast of Norway, whether you could do anything with that, combine sailing on that with going ski touring.
It doesn't drop you off in very handy places. It stops in Tromsø, of course. I think the next stop after that is Alta. You could hop off, spend a day or two and hop back on it again. Where south of Tromsø, it stops probably in, I think maybe Harstad, Svolvær in Lofoten. You could do it. It might turn out pricey, but you could do it. But I think it doesn't stop long enough that you can ski from the boat and hop back onto the same boat. You'd have to leave, probably stay a night, do something and then get back on the boat.
Right. All right. So a question about the practicalities of going up in a camper van. I don't know if you've got any experience with that.
I think that would be a good option. Norway has this everyman's rights where you can basically stop and camp as long as you're not too close to a house or bothering sort of agricultural use. And I think that applies to camper vans. There's certainly plenty of camper vans there in the summer. So yeah, good option.
And I know you did pick it up again, but again, questions about weather and kind of like, yeah, but there's a lot of really good snow in those photographs. When is it falling? If you're saying that the weather's mostly good.
I'm not saying the weather's mostly good. I mean, it snows there regularly. The snow, the snow will mostly come. This year wasn't great, but the snow will mostly come around December. In most years we'll be there until late April. If it's been a poor snow year, by mid-April you might have to start doing a bit of walking, the first couple of 100 meters vertical, but often not. It's a long season. It's in a way it's a lot longer than the Alps. It's very far north. It's 60 well north of the Arctic Circle. The sun is low. The snow doesn't melt that quickly.
And it only snows at night.
Right.
we believe you, we really do. Right, a question about snow stability from Tim. Better than in the Alps or inland mountain areas? How did you find it?
Maybe it's a maritime area, so it's not a it's not a sort of continental snowpack, except possibly in some of the inland areas. Midwinter it will be the snows, there's not going to be much, it's going to be cold for a long time. I think once if you're going there in the main season, it's like anywhere, it just depends what's been happening before, how the weather's been, if it hasn't snowed for a long time, have layers formed, hoar formed, ice layers. That can happen sometimes. I think it's happened this year actually, that it's been warm, it rained or melted high up, and then it snowed on top of it, so you get some layers to slide. It's snow and it's mountains, and you have to be careful.
Right, a question about huts. Are there anything like the sort of mountain huts refugees that used to be in the Alps?
Not really, no. Sorry, I meant to mention that. There's a few around the Narvik area, which I think I mentioned. The rest of the places, there are some private, or community huts, community-owned huts. Some are open, and you can use them, and there's an honesty box. There's no guardian or anything like that, but they're usually quite nice. Some are locked, but I believe you can get the key if you contact the local community. You can probably arrange to do that. Many are not there's not that many which make good bases for skiing. There's one or two in Lyngen that probably would, and traversing between them, again, they're not, again in Lyngen, not ideally situated for that. There is a lengthways traverse in Lyngen, which actually some eagles did, with a lot of pulling along the shore. Basically, all the valleys tend to cross Lyngen, so it's not ideal. But basically, there isn't really a hut system, as you know, or there isn't a hut system as you know it in the Alps.
So everything we're talking about is really day touring.
It's day touring, yes. I mean, you can make expeditions if you want to do that, but most of it is accessible through day touring. And personally, that's what I like to do. I like to come back to a nice, comfortable house and have a shower and some nice food and warm bed. Start again the next day. I like going on expeditions as well, but it's different. Sorry.
I was just going to say, sorry, I'm interrupting.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
You can actually. I have done some multi-day touring in the area from Narvik. Narvik's a really great area.
Yes.
And you can there was some on the chat, you know, you can take a car and you can pretty much drive anywhere, can't you, and just make your own trip wherever you want to, looking at maps. But you can, there's a really good railway between Narvik and Riksgränsen in Sweden.
Yes.
And you can get off that, you can sort of jump off that train at some point. And there are some DNT huts which are unmanned, so you have to take your own gear. You could even polk it through or something, and do trips from there. It's really, you know, it's really great. You know, there are some unmanned DNT huts with lots of places you can go. It's quite an adventure. Yes,
I think that area is, as I said, is quite relatively well equipped with huts, and you know, I think there's been some eagle trips in the last couple of years with David Williams and Iona Pawson, who have done some sort of polking and camping and hut trips, coming up from Kebnekaise up through the very remote Swedish mountains. We haven't talked about the Swedish mountains, but there's some very remote areas in northern Sweden which come up to that Narvik area for multi-day sort of more expedition style trips.